Anyone who inserts a but when acknowledging or condemning a needs some serious and immediate self-reflection. But if the Democratic Party is either unable or unwilling to rein in or condemn the extremists in its ranks, then is it any wonder they're polling just below gas station sushi? The right isn't perfect, but the left is in moral shambles.
He's been one of the most divisive, especially divisive younger figures in this, who is constantly sort of pushing this sort of hate speech or sort of aimed at certain groups. And I always go back to hateful thoughts lead to hateful words, which then lead to hateful actions.
I have breaking news. We think that Charlie Kirk just got shot in the neck. Hey, ooh, ah.
I want to reiterate that it is not wrong or unethical or unkind to laugh at the misfortunes of terrible people. That Charlie Kirk incited violence. That's what he did. And then that came back to haunt him.
Now, there's so many funny parts about Charlie Kirk getting shot in the neck. For me, personally, the funniest part is that on the way out, he hit him with one of these. Spaz hands on the way out is a tough look.
So it's got nothing to do with the people who are laughing and joking about him becoming a human water fountain.
You can imagine the administration using this as a justification for something.
And the campus had been divided ahead of his arrival as to whether he should be allowed to speak.
It's no secret, Mary, that Charlie Kirk has said a number of controversial things over the years, in particular about DEI, Jews, women, LGBTQ community, people of color.
Disgusting. And the examples are endless. While some come from clueless TikTok trolls, far too many are from career media professionals who frankly should know better. Anyone who inserts a but when acknowledging or condemning a needs some serious and immediate self-reflection. He lost his life over words. Words. And look, I don't celebrate cancel culture, nor do I take joy in people losing their jobs. But if you're celebrating the assassination of someone you've probably never even met just because you didn't like what they said or believed, then I have to question whether you should be interacting with customers, clients, or the public in any official capacity. To be blunt, maybe you're not well suited for public-facing work at all. Now, to be fair, not all Democrats or progressives are to blame. Many have been thoughtful, kind, and genuine. But if the Democratic Party is either unable or unwilling to rein in or condemn the extremists in its ranks, then is it any wonder they're polling just below gas station sushi? Joining me now to weigh in from the other side of the aisle is Democrat strategist and former press secretary to Jill Biden, our friend Michael LaRosa. Michael, it's great to talk to you. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I know that you are a good and decent person. You're also very rational, very logical, very realistic. You and I have had many discussions on a wide variety of political topics. But I want to get your initial reaction to not only the assassination of Charlie Kirk, but how many on perhaps your side of the political divide are reacting to it.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. I love coming on. And I just want to say, in reaction to the actual assassination, I regret that I didn't know much about him, actually, that I'm learning more about him in his death than I did while he was alive. And part of that is ignorance on my part. And I would say that I personally, because I do find and consider myself to be probably a above average, informed, day-to-day issues, politics, I tend to cast aside and tune out provocative partisans on both sides. I block out Al Sharpton. I put him in a box. He's not reflective of the rest of my party. And I didn't know much about Charlie at all. I only knew about the inflammatory things. But last night when I watched Will Kane's program and saw some of the full context of things he said, it was helpful. It was truly helpful. And as I told, Mark Halperin last night, I mean, again, I just regret that I'm learning more about him in death rather than while he was here with us.
Right. Well, I appreciate, you saying that. And I guess for me, I always preface it as I did in my open. I think that most people on the left, certainly the everyday Democrat out there that votes for Democrat is left-leaning. I choose to believe, and I do believe, that most people on the left are horrified by what happened. If for any other reason, then this is a 31-year-old husband and father of 2 young children. I would hope that anyone would be horrified by that, especially because it happened so publicly and because the video is being shared and reshared and you're watching someone violently lose their life. And I believe most people at a human level are horrified by that. But unfortunately, Michael, there are a lot of people who are not horrified by it. There are a lot of people, and you've got your crazy loon fringe people on social media. I'd even put those people aside. It feels like there are several prominent people on the left and certainly in mainstream media who cannot just fully go there and express true condemnation of the assassination, can't express true horror and sympathy for the family. It feels like they always have to put a disclaimer or a but or a what about, and that feels icky to me.
Yeah. Look, I totally agree. I have this problem with my party when a school shooting happens or there's a massacre somewhere. And, I had the unfortunate, experience of traveling with the Bidens around the country to funerals and to memorials for several massacres. And I'm a Democrat. I've always been probably, I guess you could say, pro-gun control. And I've never touched a gun in my life, even though I'm from Pennsylvania and we had off for hunting season my whole life. I have nothing against it. I just have no interest in it. But I find it really outrageous, really unseemly when my party chooses to use the first 24 hours or first 48 hours to talk about legislation and advocacy. And I think about my own family and who are very private. And if they were mourning the death or they were in the shock of the emotion of experiencing a loved one being, would you want anybody in the country talking about politics or legislation or advocacy? There's plenty of time for that. But the question, and then that brings me to the Matt Dowd thing on MSNBC. Full disclosure, I used to be a producer for Chris Matthews for 7 years on MSNBC. The network is sort of not what it used to be, to say the least. But the fact that the question was asked in the first place, that the cable news, because they have so much time to fill, I think, are searching for ways to find and tie anything to politics, even when it's so inappropriate in the moment. And Katie Tur is a close friend of mine, and I love her dearly. But I think there are platforms that have given a green light to politicize tragedy in a really inappropriate and reprehensible way.
Yeah, it's hard to watch a lot of these mainstream leftist networks and not come away feeling, I guess the best word I can describe is icky. It's almost as if they're looking to justify it. And of course, there's a caveat. They have to say, we condemn the violence, we condemn death, assassination, but look at all the things that he said. And I think if they would just repeat that back to themselves enough times, they would realize how absolutely immoral it sounds to say, but he said this. Yeah, he used words. He said words. He went to and this is another thing that really pisses me off, Michael, and I think it probably pisses you off too, because you and I have these conversations often. Every Tuesday I have a liberal on my show, and I think I do a pretty good job of opening the floor and the platform and being like, I want to hear from you. Charlie Kirk did that on college campuses. I've done that on college campuses, but he has gone to these college campuses and he put up a tent that said, prove me wrong. He gave the microphone quite literally to people who hate him and said, all right, express yourself and then I will express my reaction to it. That's what he did. And the fact that he opened himself up for dialogue and debate, and he went into the lion's den to do that and offer up his platform and his microphone. And then these people sit on cable news and they go, well, but he said things that offended people. Hate speech. Hate speech. Half the time he was talking about godliness, faith, marriage, family. And yes, he talked about political discussions that maybe the left doesn't agree with. But this whole trying to make Charlie Kirk seem like he was way on the outer fringe, I think is not only unfair, but I think it's immoral.
Okay, so there's no question that there should be no caveats or justification when we're talking about, first and only, this is a human tragedy. This is not about politics. This is about a human reaction to a very human event. And that is how I believe Democrats should be responding. And if they're not, they should be. This is a human tragedy more than anything else. Politics exists always. Look, there are going to be, and I think, Tomi, if I'm being honest, I think your side, my side, I'm shocked at how little they understand each other or are able to kind of put themselves in the other's mindset. There's going to be a lot of things. To most people on my team, Charlie will not be probably remembered as fondly as you would hope he might be. That's okay. But that doesn't mean that we celebrate violence or we celebrate his death or that we resolve our differences. No matter how you describe speech. And by the way, freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequence or freedom of ramification. But we don't solve our political disagreements by taking out a gun and silencing somebody who feels differently than you. Whether you believe the facts are on your side or you believe you're morally superior or not, okay. But what does silencing somebody permanently and taking a life away have to do with anything when it comes to politics?
Yeah. Well, I obviously wholeheartedly agree with you. As I've been watching, and I've seen it from, a lot of folks, so I would consider mainstream left-leaning, not the MSNBCs even, just the CNNs and even just the pundits that are on, other networks that I would consider to be pretty reasonable Democrats. And in discussing this, they also have this knee-jerk reaction to say both sides do this. And I'm not saying, Michael, that both sides don't have their fringe, their crazies, their extremists, their people that are full of hate. Both sides certainly do. But to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like within the last 10 years, the bullets only seem to be flying one way. So both sides need to tone down the rhetoric. Both sides need to try to find understanding and compassion for one another. I agree. But to me, that both sides argument, I find to be a little flimsy.
So when you, as I said, I didn't know much about him. I only knew the inflammatory, or what some people on the left would consider maybe inflammatory things or the controversial things he might say. Again, when you put them into context, sometimes you're missing actually what he was truly saying. I had to correct my own mother today. And I had to say, no, go watch how he felt about LGBT people or gay people. It actually, he was a total friend to gay people. I said, this White House has gay Republicans in it. The Secretary of Treasury, the man fifth in line to the presidency, is the most senior LGBT official. And that should have nothing to do with anything. My point is this story has had such a blast radius that it's been so jarring to me how big it's been. But that said, Tomi, I think there wasn't an equal blast radius when the Speaker of the Minnesota House was gunned down.
I knew you were going to say that.
Hold on.
I knew you were going to say that.
Was gunned down at her door with her husband and her dog on a list of 42 on a hit list of Democrats. A state senator who was shot 8 times, his wife who was shot 9 times. Gabby Gifford, who was executed or attempted execution at a grocery store. Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi, somebody broke into their house searching for them, and an 82-year-old was beat within inches of his life. Or the senator from New York City who was Bobby Kennedy, the mayor of San Francisco, Harvey Milk, or President John Kennedy. No. This is a both sides thing, and it's not right or left. It is violence. It is people who choose to solve differences or make their points through violence.
Yeah. So
and
here's my question for you, and all of those are tragedies, by the way. All of those are tragedies, and I acknowledge what happened in Minnesota. And most people were unfamiliar, unless you live in Minnesota. Yeah. Most people are unfamiliar with who those people are, right?
You're right.
So this person that carried out their assassinations, he knew who they were, and he was obviously disturbed, as I believe everyone is who carries out an attack like that. And to
be fair, Charlie is a celebrity, and he has the love and affection and loyalty of probably half of the country. That the Speaker of the Minnesota House, as powerful as she was as a public servant in that state, just didn't have. And that's unfortunate because we tend to shine lights on celebrities. Not that they're not deserving.
Well, no, but Michael, not everybody knows who leads local politics if you don't live in that state. It's not because we don't care. You don't know every leader of Tennessee, I'm sure, like you don't. And I don't know the leader of every state. That's because politics is local. But what I would say about this is, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't believe anybody ever celebrated that or said, well, but. I don't believe it when these people were assassinated. I don't believe that anybody, and maybe you can find some people on the depths of the internet, but I don't believe that anybody, certainly mainstream, I don't believe anybody sat on Fox News and was like, but they said some things, or but they voted on this. So I don't remember ever seeing that, Michael, ever.
No, I mean, to be fair, there was a lot of fringe conspiracy theorists who mocked the attack on Mr. Pelosi. That wasn't everybody. I don't know if it was taken as seriously as it should have been by some on the right, but that's beside the point. I mean, this public assassination. There's just no words to describe the vulgarity and savageness of what happened to him unnecessarily. Yeah. So I can't, Democrats had a president. If we want to make this a D versus R thing, I don't think we should.
Michael, it's not a D versus R thing, but there's certainly something happening right now. And for as much as I hear Democrats talk about toning down the rhetoric, within the same 24 hours, they'll call President Trump Timu Hitler.
Oh,
or they'll call him Nazi or this. And you know what? I don't see that changing. And once you continue to say this person's a Nazi, this person's Hitler, this person's a threat to democracy, this person's an existential threat, and then all the people around him are also equally a threat to your livelihood. They're trying to erase trans people. All of this stuff that they're saying, that goes into people's minds, especially young people, because young people, and we've seen the videos as I played at the top here, where young people are like, yes, this Charlie Kirk, and they're saying horrible, awful stuff, mocking him, mocking his death. Now, this is widespread. This isn't like a few people that you could find on the deep interwebs. This is everywhere.
Well,
and it's horrifying.
Those people that you picked out for everyone on the left or on TikTok, if we go searching for them, we can find them on the right too when tragedy occurs. But
it's not hard to search, Michael. Be honest.
I know.
It's not hard. You don't have to really look too hard. You can find them all over the place. You're seeing them. And does it bother you at all the number of people that are working in professional life, whether they're surgeons or whether they're working at an Office Max, how deeply rooted their hatred is?
It does.
I mean, that to me is pretty wild.
I saw professors getting fired or saying things they shouldn't have and now have to deal with the ramifications. Again, to my side, freedom of speech does not mean freedom of consequence. It does not mean freedom of ramification. And private companies and universities and newspapers should have the right to dismiss anybody they feel isn't reflective of that company's values. And I hope they do.
Yeah, there should be a bright line there when it comes to celebrating someone's. I think
absolutely.
I think free speech is great. I don't like cancel culture, and I don't take joy in being like, get that person, get them fired. I don't like any of that. But to me, if you're the kind of person who thinks that you should go and publicly post celebrating someone's, especially if you're in a position which is a public-facing position, whether you are a doctor or you are a professor or what have you, the fact that you're willing to put that out there tells me that there's something wrong up here. That there's something that's not fitting correctly, and you probably shouldn't be interacting with the public because you probably are in some ways dangerous.
I don't disagree with you. I find it completely offensive and shocking that professional adults who don't even live and breathe politics day to day feel like they can publicly celebrate someone's just because of what they either said or how you feel about their political beliefs. It's kind of like when Elon Musk was targeted and his cars were being lit on fire by some people on the left. Or some people on the left decided they didn't want to drive his cars anymore. I just thought, like, who gets into their car and thinks about politics and like cares that much that you're going to give up your car just because you don't like the political positions of the owner of the company? I don't know. There's something that has taken politics too far. And to me, I don't believe it's contained to a single party or either party.
Yeah, I guess I would ask you this though, because I'm genuinely curious.
Yeah.
I can't think of a time where a liberal, a leftist, a Democrat, elected or otherwise, has gone to a college campus and chaos ensues. You know, we'll even take the assassination, the execution part out of it. I can't think of a time where the left is received that way on a college campus. Why do you think that is? That the left, every time a conservative speaker comes, they will protest. They will, it's happened to me personally. I can't think of a lot of times where I've gone if that hasn't happened to some degree, some worse than others, certainly. But I don't see conservatives acting that way. I don't see a mass numbers of conservatives acting that way when Hillary Clinton comes to campus or you have a liberal speaker come to campus. Or I don't see young conservatives acting the way that young liberals are acting, particularly in the last 10 years.
I think it depends what college campus you go to. I've seen plenty of examples of Hillary Clinton being booed and mocked.
Booed and mocked is a little bit different than when you have a mass protest that turns, in many cases, because I've been there, violent. It's one thing to say, oh, I don't like you, or oh, boo, Yeah, the kids are kids. That's college campuses. They'll boo the rival sports team. I'm talking full-fledged, out there with signs, F you, trying to beat down the walls, trying to cancel the event, trying to pressure the university to not even have that speaker come. I have not seen that on the right. And I don't know if you can think of an example where that has happened.
So I'll say this. I think that's disgusting that anybody should experience that because what it says about some college, I don't want to put all college kids in the same bucket because there's, as we see on a lot of issues, that there's some real campuses that need to get their students and their campus more secure and in line, and have the guts to do it. But look, college campuses are traditionally filled with young people. Young people are, generally speaking, more liberal, more progressive than most other places. It would be like me going to an evangelical church and, saying I'm pro-choice, or I'm for late-term abortion. Like, of course I'm going to be treated brutally, right? But
I don't know if you'd be treated brutally, by the way. I guess I would push back against that. And I guess, to me, the proof is in the pudding. Like, we can think about hypotheticals all we want, but sure. I think we both know, in the wake of the assassination of Charlie Kirk, you see conservatives out there holding vigils, praying together. You see them crying. When the left is mad about something, when something happens that causes them the slightest bit of inconvenience or offense, their reaction is to burn things, to destroy things, to protest violently, to react in a mob mentality. And you see it from the pro-Palestinian bullshit to when you have a conservative come on campus, to all of this. That is their reaction. And the universities really are, in my opinion, to blame, because they don't crack down on it. They say, well, if you've got this perspective, like, have at it, right? I haven't seen conservatives act that way. And I think you and I well know that, God forbid, someone on the left who is as prominent as Charlie Kirk were to be publicly executed. I think you know damn well, Michael, that your side wouldn't be out there holding vigils and praying together peacefully. They would be going bat crazy, because that is what they have proven themselves to behave like every single time. Yeah. After Martin Luther King or Harvey Milk or John F. Kennedy or Senator Robert F. Kennedy, when they were in public, there were vigils, for sure. You're going back to a time when people were much more reasonable. I wish we were there. Well, we're not, Michael. We're not there, Michael. Even when they mourned the death of George Floyd, how did they mourn the death of George Floyd? I hear you. An entire summer of burning things to the ground. Hey, I hear you. I was on the Biden campaign at the time. I think on a morning call, I said, I think responding to violence with violence is unacceptable. And I was called a racist, and they tried to write me up on the campaign. And wait a second, Michael. I need you to repeat that. You said during the 2020 Biden campaign that when people were rioting in the summer of love and all of this, and you said to your group of fellow campaigners, you said we shouldn't meet violence with violence, and they called you a racist, Michael? We were talking about, I lived on 14th Street in Washington, by the way. I moved out of Washington for a lot of obvious reasons. But yeah, I was pissed that I couldn't go to the pharmacy because it was boarded up because people trashed it, or couldn't go, to simple stores because they were boarded up because people were behaving like vigilantes. And I said, I just don't understand why certain groups or certain people respond to violence with violence as if it's going to solve the problem. And Joe Biden actually ended up going to Philadelphia and saying it a few days later, something similar. But yeah, there were watch out, Lily. But there were people. This is when I started to realize that you can't have honest conversations when it comes to race in my party, because I was called a racist because I simply said responding to violence with violence is senseless. Yeah. So in saying that, in your own personal reflection on that, Michael, do you think that the left throws around the term racist a little too freely? 1,000%. A year ago today, Tommy, I think it was a year ago this month, I was watching Morning Joe at 6 a.m. hour. 6 a.m. is when you lead with the news and, usually getting to a lot of events. It was the middle of the campaign. Morning Joe was leading their segment. This is maybe 3 weeks out from the election, talking about Hitler and the Republican candidate, Donald Trump. And I'm thinking, oh my God, if
this is what a progressive network is starting their editorial with. We are done. We are there's no way we're going to win if this is all we've got. First of all, it does a disservice to the people who were actually slaughtered and by Hitler. I think it's a joke when I hear fascism or racist or autocrat is a big thing or oligarch, all of these things. And voters just aren't buying it where I'm from. I'm from Pennsylvania, in a district that went Obama, Trump, Biden, back to Trump. People don't buy that garbage anymore. They don't believe the alarmist language of my party. And I wish my party cared more about winning elections than they do about winning the argument. But they don't seem to.
You're losing both currently.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and this is not a bright moment for Democrats right now. I'll tell you that.
No.
There hasn't been a forceful enough condemnation of the assassination of a 31-year-old husband and father. There hasn't been full-throated. They just haven't. I mean, it just hasn't been, and you know that it has not been sufficient.
But who are you looking for to fully condemn, and what else do you want them to do? I guess is my point.
Well, I'll tell you this: maybe mainstream networks, instead of spending all of their time rationalizing why Charlie was such a bad guy, maybe they just talk about how absolutely horrifying it is that a young man went to a college campus and was gunned down for having differing beliefs. Maybe just say are they really though? Because I mean,
they are, Tommy, but they're doing it in the context with the caveats that you don't like.
Not that I don't like. That's immoral. That's disgusting. It's indecent.
I think it's unseemly to be talking about treating this so politically. No matter what he said in his life, he did not deserve to be in public or executed the way he was. And that's I think that's what's left from the conversation, is that some of these mainstream networks or cable networks feel like they've already have this permission slip to go a little bit too far. And that's going to be a problem for the Democratic Party. And I remember, not to keep bringing it back to one specific network, but when Pete Hegseth was called a white nationalist on MSNBC, and I was pissed, not because I love Pete Hegseth. I didn't think he was qualified to be defense secretary for a lot of different reasons. But the fact that I disagree with him on DEI policy is not what makes him doesn't give anybody the right to call him a white nationalist. And I said that. I tweeted it. I said Democrats need to run away from people using language like this about the other side. And I received a handwritten death threat to me and my family at my office in Washington, D.C. And, we found out where it was traced to, luckily, because I think I had a security clearance. The Secret Service and D.C. police were able to find the person. But that is because of lunatics on the left, because I said we shouldn't call people white supremacists. It really does a disservice to actual white supremacists or white nationalists, because I disagree with Pete on HR policy or whatever. And by the way, I don't. But my point is, you see the reaction and the I don't even know how to describe it.
Yeah,
but
Senator Ted Cruz said something last night. He was just ahead of me on Hannity, and he said something that really resonated with me. He said, they don't kill you because you're a Nazi, right? They call you a Nazi so they can kill you. And that really was like, wow. Unfortunately, that feels like we have a president in office right now who had 2 attempts on his life, within months of each other, right?
Yeah, but let's also remember, Tommy, that the assassin who tried to kill the president was also stalking a Democratic president, was also stalking President Biden. And we have to be careful about how we overly broaden or generalize the politics of some of the motives behind some of these people. I mean, these are people who just want to and commit violence for reaction in some cases.
Next thing I want to ask you about too, and I think this is important, and I really want to get your feedback in the little bit of time I have left with you. I think that we have to have a real discussion in this country about what has become, I call it the rainbow mafia, but an extreme fringe part of LGBTQIA. We've now had within a month's time.
I just say LGBTQ, by the way. I don't know the other parts.
They always add to it. Unfortunately, this has become, and I've had, guests refer to it as a death cult. Now, that's not to say everybody in LGBTQ fits that. They certainly do not. But there is a fringe part of this LGBTQ, and it's often people that are not LGBTQ themselves, by the way, as we learn more about this alleged assassin, as we learn more about the shooter at the Catholic school in Minnesota. There are certain, and here in Nashville, not to say that, every person that's in this group or, allies with this group is violent. I'm not saying that, certainly not. But sure. I think now that we have an established pattern here, we need to discuss, the left constantly says that, President Trump wants to erase trans people, or he wants to, and all I've heard from President Trump is there's two genders and men shouldn't be in women's sports or spaces, right? Yeah. And President Trump has Caitlyn Jenner with him. I've been in the same circles with Caitlyn Jenner, and I consider Caitlyn Jenner to be a friend of mine for years. So this notion that Republicans who want to protect women's sports and spaces are somehow wanting to erase trans people, that message has gone to people that are a part of this rainbow mafia, and they're acting on it, Michael.
Yeah. Well, by the way, first, before we get to that part, most Democrats feel the same way the president does. They're just too scared and chicken to say it. And that pisses me off. I'm a former NCAA athlete. No way in terms of fairness, should biological men should be competing in girls' women's sports. It just shouldn't happen. If Democrats could just say that, the question would go away. But the fact that Democrats can't say that, it just terrifies voters on culture and shows sort of the excesses we are willing to go to in our party to appease small constituency groups. And they're never going to, what my party hasn't learned yet, they're not going to trust us on the economy, no matter how much they think tariffs are hurting the economy or how many cuts to Medicare. If you can't say boys should be competing in boys sports and biological girls should be competing, if you can't say that, voters aren't going to give you the benefit of the doubt on the economy, because it's not a common sense position right now. And if it requires nuance, chances are the voters really don't want to hear a nuanced scientific-based argument. But maybe we do need more science. Maybe there is science and medical research out there that will actually talk about what you're talking about. Is there violence connected to some of the what did you call it? The people who are
the rainbow mafia, the LGBTQ death cult.
I mean, this shooter wasn't obviously medically or biologically. He wasn't transitioning, but I think it's a fair question to ask whether there is some kind of connection, scientifically or medically, to violence. I would like to know. I'd like to know more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, people that are transitioning, if hormones or puberty blockers or whatever influences their chemistry in their brain. I think that's definitely worthwhile to address. But even if you take out the biology out of it, like there are people that they're so zealous about this LGBTQ stuff. That is like their issue. And now we're getting more information. Of course, all of this is reported, all of it's alleged, but that the alleged assassin of Charlie Kirk was communicating via the Discord gaming platform saying, like, I've got to do this because, some hate can't be satisfied. Hate can't be negotiated or something exactly.
like that.
And so it would seem that at least to him, the messages from the left about like, this is the thing, like this is the hill that they will die on, or in this case, on, that is very concerning to me.
But let's go back to, take that and then take the gun argument I brought up. Now, what have conservatives always said? It's not the guns that kill people, it's people that kill people. In this case, it doesn't matter what his passions or political passions or advocacy, where I want to know what in this kid's brain made him think that using a gun to end somebody's life is an answer to anything. And that has nothing to do with left or right. And that's what I think we need to figure out here. Because, again, you know the list. It's a very bipartisan list of Democrats and Republicans who've been the victims of what you call political violence. But what is it about certain people that they take their politics into a place that they think, that they believe it's their right to take another life?
I can tell you exactly why I think that is, and this is just me speculating, but I believe it's because these young leftists have been so coddled by their institutions, by their teachers, by popular culture, by social media. They have been told over and over again, these people are evil. And they've also been told any way that you want to act, you might not face any consequences, but if you do face some, it'll be a slap on the wrist. So I think that this notion to them, by any means necessary, I think it's been reinforced. When you don't punish people for rioting on college campuses or at Columbia, you know, busting down doors and basically holding people hostage, the janitor hostage, and, you know, these people are maybe expelled, maybe suspended, maybe nothing. You see the summer of 2020 where people in the name of George Floyd could do whatever the hell they want. That reinforced in their mind, like, hey, I must be on the moral high ground here, because up until now, the other people that are doing this really haven't faced any consequences. And so then in their mind, they're like, well, I got to take it a step further then, because we're rioting, we're protesting, we're looting, we're lighting things on fire, we're, you know, physically assaulting people, we're spitting on people, but it's not solving the problem that we see. And so then they take it the extra step. And that's what I think's happening.
Yeah. Well, okay. I don't disagree with all of that. I'm always reluctant to put people in a broad box. And so I did experience being on the other side, I think. And I don't want to compare the severity and seriousness of what we're talking about in this, but you saw a really slippery slope, I think. And it's not just on the right, okay, but when we were riding in a motorcade with the First Lady, or especially with the president or with Biden, I think he was shocked to his core, but there were times when I was it was a little jarring. We were all a little bit afraid, even in an armored motorcade, at some of the really aggressive hostility and the language and the really sick things that were said on signs or screaming or really offensive. This is not to compare any situation to the other. I want to be very clear, but there is an aggressiveness out there that is very uncomfortable. I think on both sides.
Yeah, no, and I would condemn that. I would fully condemn that, though, Michael. But I think that here's the difference that I'm seeing, and I keep hearing this both side whataboutism arguments, and I understand it. I understand
it's not whataboutism, but how do we move forward if we keep? Yeah. Well, if you keep saying the left is bad, or we're the left is worse than our side, who wins?
Yeah,
how do we move forward?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, here's the deal: when consequences are not applied not to speech. Listen, I don't like the speech that some people use, and I think a lot of it is disgusting. I don't believe in jailing people for their speech, right? If they've got like F Joe Biden or F Trump on the thing, like it's jarring and it's awful, and it's like, oh, I don't like this, or worse, like, but that's free speech, right? And I don't like it, and something that Charlie and I always talked about is free speech is saying what you want to say, but it's also hearing things you don't want to hear. But when it goes to a level of you're now being violent, it's a mob mentality, you're beating people, you're rioting, you're looting, you're busting windows, you're lighting things on fire. But the left is the ones that are doing that, but they're not facing the consequences for it. In fact, in some cases, they're getting settlements paid out to them after they've rioted in 2020 in New York City. And so to me, that's the solution here is like whatever group is doing it, if you cross that line and you become violent, you have to face consequences because then the message is sent out that this is not tolerated. Unfortunately, that message has not been sent out by the left.
I'm with you 1,000%. There should be legal and criminal consequences for anybody who commits any act of violence, whether it's setting a car on fire or assaulting somebody or executing someone. I'm with you 1,000%. And it would be politically to our advantage as Democrats if more Democrats would say exactly that anybody who behaves like savages will pay the consequences. Voters want to actually feel like you want to protect their safety and security. And my party has really lost its way when it comes to having a gut feel for what the average person prioritizes. And I'm just going to, say the quiet part out loud, but it's not tariffs. Tariffs do a lot of bad things. As a free trader, I say that, but that's not exactly how voters prioritize how they feel about candidates. So I'm with you. I'm with you 1,000% on that there needs to be consequences. But while we're on that subject, can I ask you a question though? Because we both agree that violence, no matter what kind, right, is unacceptable and there should be consequences. And I'm not one of those people or liberals or whatever who uses this as a ad hominem response to everything. But
yes, January 6th.
I'm just curious. It was a deadly riot, and it was violent, and it was a scary moment for even people in the Trump White House. Yeah. were terrified.
Yeah.
Do you think those folks should have faced consequences, and do you think it was right to be relieved of those consequences?
So I'll go back to January 6th itself. I was very outspoken about it and my horror and my shock about it. I have never, ever excused what happened. Now, I have questions. I'm wondering, different things about that day, and maybe we don't know the full scope of how it all went down, and that's fine. But regardless, I think it's disgusting, it's horrible, and I never condone it, right? But I do think there is a difference. And the people that actually caused the violence, the people that actually were attacking law enforcement and all that, those people deserve to face consequences, and they did. Now, do I believe that a grandmother that was walking down, the hallway, do I believe she should be thrown in the gulag for 10 years? No, I do not. So I think that there is a lot of gray area there, but anybody who actually did something violent or horrible or disgusting, those people need to pay the consequences for that. And I have never been one to be like, oh no, that's fine. I understand their rage. Let them out. Like, that's not how I am. However, do I think there were a lot of people that were simply there? They got swept up in it. Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think those people deserve to be behind bars, but anybody that did anything violent, certainly they deserve to pay the consequences for that. And again, it's like, I understand that that's like the linchpin of the Democrat argument is like January 6th, January 6th, but
it's not mine, but it is the most recent case of political violence at its worst, and seen through hours and hours. I mean, our city had to be, the National Guard had to be called in.
I think Trump also offered up the National Guard prior to the event, but that's another story.
That's another story for another day. People dispute that, like his own Secretary of Defense. But the point is, that was a huge, huge historic example of political violence that should not be tolerated. And the people that did commit violence that day and attacked police officers were let off the hook.
You think they they didn't serve any time for that?
Well, if they did, they were blanket pardoned.
How many years do you think that if you assault an officer, right? So that's what these people that I would say were the worst of the worst, right? If they actually did assault officers, I would consider those to be the worst of the worst.
To attack a police officer? I don't know. I mean, usually police officers, when they're attacked, will respond and probably kill you.
Actually, Babbitt got shot, so.
Yeah. Yes. When you violate the law, I mean, like, look, people who run from police officers after they commit a crime, or when a police officer feels threatened, we've seen a lot of examples. And people like to make it about race, and it's not. It's about violating the law. It's about violating the law, but also taking the law in your own hands by thinking you can ignore law enforcement.
Yeah, and I've never agreed with resisting arrest. I think we could avoid a lot of the problems that we've had with use of force.
I agree.
If people didn't resist
but
arrest.
People racialize it on my side. And
of course they do. I mean, that's a your side thing. For me, I see a lot of anger in young liberals, and I think that just like when you don't discipline a child, they're going to run wild and they're going to have zero consequences and they're going to keep pushing their boundaries. And I think that you saw an example of that.
But so what's the answer? I mean, when we would be riding around and these young kids would be holding up signs, young kids that would say, F Joe Biden, or Joe Biden's a pedophile. Like, how do we move beyond the nonsense and the crazy, violent rhetoric? And
yeah. Well, I would say again to our earlier discussion, and I got to wrap this up. There's free speech that we don't like that is still protected speech. So saying F Joe Biden, whether you like it or not, is protected speech. Even saying Joe Biden's a pedophile, that's protected speach, right? When you start lighting things on fire, or you start in a mob running people down, then that's
it's not always protect. You can't slander. And
but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yes,
There's things that you're going to see that are going to make you uncomfortable, and things I'm going to see that are going to make me uncomfortable.
Sure.
That's not the bright line there, though. And to me, the solution, again, Michael, is if you cross that line, you have to face consequences. And if you are not facing consequences from your university or from the law, you're going to continue to do that, and then you're going to up the ante each time until you finally go way too far. And I believe that's exactly what happened last Wednesday.
I don't disagree with you. I really don't. I mean, maximum law enforcement, and no, I'm with you. I don't. Is there anything that we can disagree on?
Well, I think we've come to a lot of consensus.
Okay.
I do have to go, but I've appreciated the conversation, as I always do. I consider you to be a very rational Democrat, and I think that your ability to criticize your own side when it's warranted is very upstanding of you.
Well, it comes at a price.
Yeah, it comes at a price because unfortunately your side will have your head for it, and that's unfortunate. But you say it anyway, and I hope that your side can reckon with itself in that way.
Thanks.
Because you certainly don't deserve that. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time on this Liberal Tuesday. These conversations are so important, and I think that these conversations actually can help move in a better direction for the nation. I think more conversations like this need to be had. So thank you so much.
I agree. Thanks for having me and giving me the opportunity.
As always. Thanks so much, Michael. All right, folks, I've been thinking a lot about what makes young leftists so angry and so prone to violence. And while only they truly know, I have some final thoughts. Democrats like to remind us that political violence is on both sides, and while that's not necessarily untrue, it definitely doesn't capture the full reality. Yeah, there are right-wing nut jobs out there, no doubt, but I can't think of a single circumstance where a left-wing speaker or prominent Democrat was met with violent protests, and certainly not riots, when they came to speak on a college campus. Now, for us on the right, that's the norm. In fact, it's the expectation. The examples are quite literally countless, so I'll just address my own experiences. With the exception of maybe one or two campuses I visited over the past 10 years plus, I've been doing this, every single event has been hostile at best and aggressively violent at worst. Now, I expect the protesters and whatever, if you want to stand outside and scream and yell with a stupid sign, knock yourself out. But I've also experienced much worse. UNM's campus being the highlight, or I guess the low light, wherein the SWAT team and the state police had to be called in. The leftist animals not only tried to forcefully beat down the doors to the auditorium I was speaking in, they vandalized their own campus. They pulled the fire alarm to force a mass evacuation, and I had to be rushed off the premises by a SWAT team after hunkering down in an auditorium's adjoining kitchen. That was the most dangerous campus situation I found myself in, but I've also had students from other campuses throw things at me, attempt to throw up on me, and more. Conservatives don't do this. Prove me wrong. In the words of Charlie Kirk, prove me wrong. So why are young leftists so rabid, so violent, so vile? Well, I've narrowed it down to a few common factors. They're instructed by activists disguised as teachers. They hate themselves and suffer from deep and severe insecurities. They've internalized imaginary victimhood and the coddling of that perceived victimhood by parents, teachers, society, pop culture, and social media. They seem to have this deep-rooted yet normalized belief that if someone offends you, they are evil, and you can do whatever you want to them after that. And until society addresses this sickness, it's never going to change. And ironically, that's exactly what Charlie Kirk dedicated his life to fixing. That's why he built TPUSA. That's why he engaged in dialogue and debate, and they killed him for it. The right isn't perfect, but the left is in moral shambles. Those are my final thoughts. Please tune in tomorrow live at 1 p.m. Eastern. Catch full episodes on Fox Nation and Outkick. Please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel at Tomi Lahren is Fearless. From Nashville, God bless.